Hi, welcome to Wise Beyond Bitcoin, your home for the crypto neo news, education, and opportunity. My name is Ryan.
I'm Jacob.
And we have a couple playlists we want to walk through before we jump into our story today. We are always focusing on the secret network. We have lots of cool playlists and videos focusing on that, whether it's updates in secret or secret NFTs, or how to start your secret crypto journey with getting a Kepler wallet downloaded and staking, sending, receiving. We also have videos about picking validators because that matters, and different validators have different rewards or different things they're doing. So choosing which one to support, it can impact you. We talk about play to earn opportunities, airdrops, and of course, we talk about the macro outlook with inflation and supply chain issues, monetary policy. Lots to talk about there. We always like to see what the news is and try to draw a conclusion with what to expect in markets, crypto markets specifically. So look out for that. But today we are going to be talking about Bitcoin maximalism, and it's fitting because Lucas, our third partner, he's actually in Miami at the Bitcoin 2022 conference. So it's fitting that we would tackle this issue of question. This article has been on my browser for a couple of days now, and I've been waiting to talk about it with you, share it with our community, and I feel like this is the best time, right?
Oh yeah, and I just want to add that we're out there in spirit. We're out
Yes,
there in the Bitcoin Miami in spirit, and that's why we're doing this today.
that's right. Yep. And also, no matter how critical we are of this article and maybe the argument for Bitcoin maximalism, we don't want to be confused as not being supporters of Bitcoin, because I do support it. I'm a fan. It's something I have in my portfolio. So it's not like I'm a critic of it. It's just this notion that it's the only one to care about or to pay attention to, that it's the one to rule them all. That's what we're taking issue with, really, right?
Yeah, I would actually say maximalism of any kind, of any token, is counterproductive and counterintuitive as an investor. That would be
That's
like
right.
saying Apple is the only stock you can make money from.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, why? That's the question. Why would this be the only one? Right. Aren't there other ideas that are worthy? So we've, in the past, I think the main argument I've come across for Bitcoin maximalism in the past has been the network effect argument, that was so early. It was a first mover in the space, and the first to prove the importance of blockchain technology, even introduce the idea, really, and for that, this advantage that it has, it created this network effect where the amount of users it has makes it such that it's a more valuable network to be a part of, because the idea of network effects is that as the users increase in a protocol or a network, then the utility of being a member of that network grows exponentially with the adoption, right? So you get this kind of this beneficial cycle, reciprocal, cycle, where more people adopt the thing, and then that makes it more valuable to the people who already had it. So that makes even more people want to adopt it, and so you just kind of get a growth pattern out of that, right?
Like a
And
growth
yeah,
chart.
parabolic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. And but the problem with that narrative is that those things can work in your favor, but network effects, I think, can cut against you too. I mean, look at MySpace. Look at how, like, once people started leaving MySpace, quickly the utility of being a member of that community dropped like a rock, and that thing was gone within a short amount of time. I mean, it still exists, but it's not being used, right? So I don't think network effects on their own are enough to justify why something might be the dominant, why a platform would dominate others. It's definitely part of the story, but it's not the end all be all. And so I bring this article. I was happy to notice this article didn't focus on network effects. It makes an argument outside of that. And so for that reason, had my attention. So anything you want to add to that before we jump into it?
No.
No. All right. Well, let's give a summary of what this article really says. And I found it in this one sentence. So the question is that, why would there be anything other than Bitcoin that would ever become popular or dominant in crypto. And the idea is that if we live in a world of honest cryptos, of which there are very few, and if there's a many grifter cryptos or scammy cryptos, then a healthy dose of intolerance is called for, and it would be necessary for prevention of the honest cryptos, from becoming scams or grifter cryptos. That's the idea. Prevent the intolerance will help prevent the former from sliding into the latter, right? So that's really the argument this post is this thread is making, or this article is making, is that it's the skepticism or intolerance of the many grifter cryptos is necessary. So for that reason, this Bitcoin maximalism position is like the default setting. And that's the argument. And I'm not so my thing on that is it sounds to me like that's just an argument for skepticism, which, and like you said in the before we started recording, it's like, well, why not apply that same skepticism to Bitcoin, right? Because there's flaws it has, and we'll get into some of those later, but there's flaws within that protocol too. So if skepticism is the name of the game, then, of course, let's just apply it across the board. Why have a fundamental Bitcoin bias, right?
And I would as well, even saying specifically about the part where it's talking about honest cryptos and grifter cryptos, I would instead categorize it as what is the use case potential? What problem is this token trying to solve? And so
right.
You have many different types of tokens that try to do things, like with Wise token being a timed locked currency, kind of like a bond almost, but it's backed by and tied to Ethereum. So as Ethereum moves, Wise token moves, similar to the gold standard. And then you have things like the Helium network, where you're providing radio coverage that's actually usable for people, where businesses are paying to be able to use that radio coverage from the blockchain. And all of a sudden now you're looking at this adoption because of the use case. It's more than just a currency. It's a technology that's being utilized. You have decentralized VPNs that protect your internet service, that protect you in countries where you might not have freedom of speech, where you might not have freedom of the press, but you to be able to upload whatever you need to upload, communicate with people in a way where your government can't control you. And I think it really comes down to the use case of cryptocurrencies rather than honest or grifter, because that really stems from a personal opinion, unless we're talking about a be all end all truth. But
I feel like this is probably overemphasizing how many scams and how much grifting there really is, because of course there are scam coins out there that exist. I mean, we all remember BitConnect is a famous one, right? But in reality, there's a lot of sound projects doing great things, right? That don't fit that shouldn't be called a grift. I mean, I wouldn't call Avalanche a grift. I wouldn't call Polygon a grift, and I wouldn't call anything on the IBC secret or Cosmo. I mean, at the end of the day, like, there's so many sound projects that you can make, like you say, you can make distinctions on what are they doing, and maybe do they have a good roadmap, or is the team developing, or are they going to be good? Will they be around in 5 years? Like, those are decent questions to ask. But if you just say, oh, it's a grift, and you don't even think about that, then I feel like that's just being dismissive, right?
I think it's a level of judgment without research.
Yeah, it feels like that. So let's move on. So one of the core arguments here is that we live in a dangerous world. I think we can all agree that's true, and that protecting freedom is a serious thing, and that there's a need for it. And this main point is that blockchain technology is a security technology, and it can help create a zone of freedom in an unfree world, right? And I think we'd all agree with that, or that it has the capacity at least to do that. And further, the idea is that there's a lot of trade-offs, of course, with the blockchains make for security. Like they require a bunch of independent, and a verification has to be done, has to be independently verified before the transaction can be verified, right? So there's a lot of duplication of effort that happens, but the security is enhanced through that, right? And then there's time you have to wait, and then there's of course, responsibility on the user to control their keys. And then there's privacy issues with public blockchains. Of course, secret network is an innovating way of dealing with that, keeping the consensus validation mechanism, but in a different way, but it's still achieving it. And then having a privacy layer as well. So that's something different. But regardless, some of these sacrifices are what are why public blockchains are secure, right? But this is not an argument for blockchain maximalism. It's an argument for Bitcoin maximalism. So I feel like some of these points are misplaced. It's really when it gets to this part here about a defensible culture, a robust and defensible culture. That's really where the argument takes shape. So the point is that there's two ingredients required for blockchain technology to serve as a source of freedom in an unfree world. The first is it has to have defensible technology, a robust technology. Of course, that makes sense. It needs to be functioning, and it needs to be have a good consensus mechanism that can withstand, your 51% attacks and different things like that. And further, it also has to have a defensible and robust culture. And I feel like this is where the argument really goes sideways for the author here. So we're going to look at some pictures of different people in the community, in the respective communities of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And you're going to see the girly, effeminate Ethereum investor or supporter versus the masculine, aggressive, radical freedom fighter here with the machete and the mask, right? And this is supposed to be an argument, I suppose, right? And then it continues with, an AR-15.
It's just like those memes where, hey, this is Wojak, this is Chad, and
right.
It's such an underdeveloped argument that I almost don't even feel like arguing against it, just because it's no different than if I was to take a picture from, let's say, any musician, right? And they might be an effeminate musician. It might be somebody like, I don't know,
Prince.
Yeah. And I could take Prince and say, okay, this music genre sucks because I don't like how feminine Prince is. But this other grunge music, totally cool. And
yeah. And it's all based on this downgrading femininity and upgrading masculinity, or what is viewed as masculinity. Anyway, did I lose you? There you are.
Okay. Cool. I was going to say, rather than having it be about the perception of masculinity, of this, of that, it should be rather the effectiveness of how secure a blockchain is, the effectiveness of how free that blockchain is. And I think a great example would be, the decentralized VPN space. You've got the DVPN, you've got stuff like on the Cosmos network like that. You've got stuff like Deeper Network, which I personally use. And it's amazing because it's a technology that allows me to be free. When I look at how often Google, Amazon, every single one of my devices pings my location and that device blocks it, it gives me peace of mind knowing that my data is not being harvested.
Right.
It gives me peace of mind using things that allow me to reclaim my privacy rather than having the perception of privacy.
Right. And I think that's a good point, because the argument this guy is making is that these ecosystems are not the same, that the guy with the AR-15 and the axe, that's the ecosystem that's going to protect you when the powerful come knocking. But if that's the case, and this is basically saying that Bitcoin is the radical freedom fighter community, right? But if you look at, and this is something we've already talked about, but I'm going to reiterate it. If you look at Bitcoin's adoption and development in the last few years, it's been a lot of institutional adoption, right? The Michael Saylors, the Bitcoin ETF, there's been a lot of big news about how Bitcoin's gone mainstream and how Wall Street's adopting it, and how there's so many more ways for mainstream, on-ramps into Bitcoin, right? And you even see, crypto exchanges advertising on the Super Bowl, right? So there's this big mainstream adoption narrative that's going on. And so I don't really see what this guy's talking about. Like these two different, both of these communities are globetrotting, about are in a sense plugged into the mainstream financial world and are not looking to be outside of it in a fundamental way. So it feels like an argument that just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just perception, like you said.
Yeah, and I would even argue too that like his perception of Vitalik being a, you know, social hungry globetrotter who's looking for validation,
Right.
I would argue that that was your perception. I mean, if you've ever watched a conference of his, which I have seen several, the man really just talks about the technology. He gets
Yeah.
excited to just talk about the things he's building. And who,
Yeah.
as an architect, wouldn't be proud of their work? Who wouldn't want to share their work?
Right. And if you look at it, some of the pictures you have with him in these events, he's got like his hair standing up, like he just got out of bed. You know, not to knock him. That's what that shows, is he doesn't give a dang about status or appearances. Like he's there to talk about the tech, like you said, and it's not about like, you know, making a big status play with the, you know, coming across as some kind of celebrity or anything like that.
I think a person that you could point out as a big status play was Elon Musk during the Dogecoin era, where it was all about Doge, always talking about Doge. We're going to have developers working on Doge, and it was all word service. And we could see that even now with what's going on. And I think to point out the people who are actually acting like celebrities, it's the celebrities who are adopting the cryptocurrencies who are really the ones who are grifting.
I agree. Now, this is where the argument takes another turn. So now we're leaving the culture layer and we're making arguments that I think actually can be, you know, grasped, and there's like objective things to be said here. And so the point here is that Bitcoin is trying to do one thing right. It's not trying to be, it thinks money and currency is the most important thing to get right. And so it's not about creating a blockchain where there's derivatives or stable coins or reputation systems or file storage or a DAO or gambling or prediction markets or anything like that. But it's just getting currency right. So do one thing and do it well. And then you even say it, or this article even explicitly makes the point, is that the exclusive focus on being money makes for a better money. And the idea is that if Bitcoin really wanted to, it could adopt or support smart contracts, right? And the idea is that there could be, they call them covenants, and there's been proposals on Bitcoin for these covenants, but they haven't passed largely because the developers are worried that the risks of introducing that kind of complexity might undermine the network, right? And make it it could cause all kinds of problems that they're worried about. So I don't really see, like you said, I don't really see how this is a plus, you know? So, you know, it's saying that it's not really well suited to having a smart contract layer added to it. But that's okay because we're just worried about being money. And it's like, but then the thing that we always say is, well, you don't even do that well. Yeah.
And I would even argue with that, to that point, you know, there are other options. And that's the reason why maximalism as a concept in any investment, I think, is just downright wrong. If you're going to be a maximalist of any kind, you're going to miss out on so much opportunity. Look at Cadena for an example. It is a smart contract platform that is also a proof of work platform. And so it's kind of a hybrid proof of stake, proof of work that is doing exactly the thing that Bitcoin can't do.
Right.
And they're doing that because they're innovating on the technology that Bitcoin made possible when it popularized blockchain technology.
Right.
But that's the thing. If we were to be saying that, you know, like the oldest computer is the only computer we could use because it was the first one, that would be ridiculous. We wouldn't have smartphones. We wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't have the computing power to do the things we're doing today. And I feel like Bitcoin maximalism, especially the idea of, well, it's a better money because it only tries to be money, just shows that Bitcoin isn't trying to innovate. And in a market where you're not innovating, you're
falling behind. That's true. That's right. And in the comparison with Ethereum, which is the only project they want to talk about, which is interesting, but they keep saying that, well, they make the point that there's minor extracted value, which is kind of an example of the complex, what happens when complexity and you introduce some of these risks and how people can game it, right? And so Bitcoin is MEV free, minor extracted value free, right? And this is a great thing. But to your point is that that they're not taking any risks, right? They've stopped developing. So yeah, Ethereum maybe took some risks and showed the world what smart contracts can do. Well, look at what's going on in Secret Network, right? They've taken that idea and ran with it. And now you've got a blockchain that has no minor extracted value. That's not possible because of the way it works. So to your point, what you were saying is that this is technology is an evolutionary thing. And yeah, there might be flaws with whatever current iteration we're at right now. That's like the next boundary where research is going to go. And that's where the next innovations are going to be at. And it's going to continue. And there's no reason to say, oh, well, the first one that doesn't even try to do any of these cool things it's the only one that we should pay attention to. Right.
And I would even add to the minor extracted value point by saying that, Bitcoin might not have minor extractive value, but have you ever tried to purchase a Bitcoin miner?
Right.
Oh, man. The power requirement for it, the ridiculous amount of the cost. I would argue in itself that, when you have a proof of work blockchain where you have a halving event, over time, what that does is it increases the computational power needed just to be able to secure the network. And it gets to a point where it's so unaffordable for that everyday person that it's technically becoming centralized, because you have to be either a large business or someone with a large amount of money to secure the network. Yeah.
And then that undermines the case of it being a good money, because if something's controlled by a few powerful elite, and especially it's the production and the supply, the way that just some new supply is distributed, if it goes to a narrow few, then how is this really a great evolution or innovation over what we had before? Because that was one of the main problems why crypto was invented in the first place, was that there was this narrow elite that had an undue influence over the supply, creation of the supply of new money, how it was distributed, where it went into the economy first, and just too much control for too few. Too few had too much control. And so I feel like, okay, that's not something we want to recreate, right, on the blockchain.
And I think that's why egalitarian tokens like Wise token, like Hex, that focus rather on like a time-locked currency, where the issuance of the currency isn't the validation itself, it's not done through validation.
Right.
Everyone using the currency, everyone who's staking, is rewarded that issuance. And so with Wise token, with Hex, it's a more equitable, more fair money distribution.
For sure. Yeah, and I totally agree. And that's one of the main reasons why Bitcoin maximalism fails, is that there's too many other innovations that have to come down the line, and it's not going to happen in Bitcoin. So I think we already addressed this point that the earliest projects, we can go through it again. He closes, the article is winding down, but the next main argument is that the earliest projects in an industry are often the most genuine. And you see here that Bitcoin, when it launched, it had the smallest insider allocation, so that it was the most fair in terms of its initial launching. And you see that other chains have had more of an insider allocation, founder allocation, and of course Binance, 50% and so on, right? And I think that's a sound point, but then it ignores what's happened since then, right? That with the minor centralization and the fact that Wall Street and the whales have come in and more or less, taken over Bitcoin. But we already tied that. We already kind of tied those loose ends up. So let's go to the next point. And this goes back to culture. And I feel like this is restating the earliest argument. And is basically the idea here is that there's a lot of scams and people who are trying to introduce centralization or government control, and that the idea here is that Bitcoin maximalism is all about creating this culture where you're immediately skeptical of outsiders and of anything that's not, that you're not familiar with, right? So it's about an intransient culture, essentially, a culture of suspicion. And I feel like, yeah, okay, that's not the worst idea in the world, but we're back to saying, well, why not be also suspicious of the flaws of with Bitcoin itself, right? Why does it get the pass?
I would rather say create a culture of learning. When you create a
Yeah,
culture around learning, when you create a culture around understanding, you create a culture that can innovate, that can thrive. And that's ultimately what I believe is at the core of why is beyond Bitcoin and what we value here. And it's why I'm against maximalism
maximalism.
as a concept, because when you're a maximalist, you're basically giving up your right to learn. You're saying, this is finished, this is complete, this is the thing that's going to end all things. It's no different than saying, the Great War, World War I, was the war to end all wars. It
Right,
wasn't.
right,
It wasn't a realistic standard, because we still have greed in the world. We still have people who are power hungry. We
yeah,
still didn't solve our underlying economic problems that led to war in the first place.
right,
And so
right.
by being a maximalist, you're essentially saying that I don't care to look for other opportunities of innovation.
It's kind of like wanting to pit pause on the time on time itself, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not going to happen. Innovation is going to continue, and also the problems, the same flaws that got us here, they don't just immediately go away, right? We still have to work out a lot of these questions, about money supply, money distribution, how new coins get put into the economy, right? And all kinds of issues. How is this stuff going to interact with the mainstream financial world? Like, it's going to be decades before these things are get finally, before we even get a half of a way or half of our minds around it. So I feel like
Yeah.
the Bitcoin maximalism position is way too certain of something that's too uncertain.
Absolutely. And I would even say that sums it up right there. I mean, you
Right.
look at it, this is a new innovative technology that's expanding, constantly growing, constantly changing. You look at this space and you find new innovations. You look at things like the Helium network, which started off as this tiny little blockchain that ended up blowing up to having hundreds of thousands of users, people who literally became like millionaires off of a single blockchain. You look at the lives that's changed. You look at the lives that Ethereum has changed with NFTs.
Yeah.
It There is so much innovation in this space, and to turn your head from it because you don't want to believe that there's innovation in this space is to turn your head away from opportunities.
Yeah. And it's not that everything there is genuine, but it's also the case that most other crypto assets are not scams. That's this bias that I don't know where. I mean, I guess I'm not sure where it comes from, but this
I
notion
mean,
that it seems to be the basic argument here in this article. And if that's the point that we're supposed to take to make the Bitcoin maximalism argument make sense, I feel like it'd be better just to go back to network effects. That was the sounder argument. And even
yeah.
though I don't think that holds water either for reasons we already mentioned, but I do believe that's sounder than this assumption that most other crypto assets are a scam.
And I would even argue to the point that with Bitcoin trying to be money, money needs to have velocity. It needs to be able to trade hands. It needs to be able to do that very seamlessly. Part of
Yeah.
the problem that Bitcoin has is its scalability issues, and is going to
Right.
continue as adoption happens. It's part of the reason why I
Indeed.
believe in layer 2 solutions and scalability solutions, because ultimately cryptocurrency is a new innovative technology that is going to be ever changing, and we're going to have new innovations in this space. And it's part of the reason why I wouldn't say I'm a maximalist of any kind, but I'm definitely more interested in the new innovations than I am the things that have already been done that we just recycle.
Right. Well said. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. This was not financial advice or commercial or legal or any other kind of advice, but I don't think we spoke about any potential investments. So I think we're in the clear on that one. But so until next time.
Have a great day.